You need to change something. I always thought of him as sort of the last of the real gentlemen. Really, he was. It was unthinkable of him to walk with a woman along a street without being on the outside, on the street side. It was unthinkable of him to go through a door without opening it for a woman. It was unthinkable not to open a chair, or to pull back a chair and push the lady in. And none of it was done, it was all done very, very naturally. I have no idea where he learned all that. Did he learn it at home with if his father ran a saloon? I don't know. You know, not to know about that is really kind of too bad. But it all was very, very natural and very quiet and very unobtrusive. But he had impeccable, kind manners. I always thought that he and my mother were very, very mismatched.
In which ways?
Well, because what happened, I mean, after he did all that stuff, I mean, did we talk about his going to, with the Fox brothers, which was after Mother and Daddy were married, and I guess, and after he worked for the bank where he saved Mars bars out in Chicago and all that. He had this engineering firm called Fox Brothers, and I have no idea how that came about, but he did a lot of work in France and in Spain and also in Turkey. If there were other things, I don't know. I know in Spain, I think I told you, King Alfonso XIII gave a beautiful shawl to my mother. Some other was with him then. And then in Turkey, and in Spain, he was working on railroads because they changed gauge from France to Spain.
Right, yeah.
And so who knows what he was doing. But anyway, and whatever, it was an engineering firm. And then I do know in Turkey that he was building dockyards for ocean liners on the Marmara. And then, of course, the railroad that... Do you remember when we stopped the bus and all got out?
Right.
And this, across this whole long Anatolian plain, just this one railroad line.
Right.
And we did a little obeisance to Grandpa. Did a little dance on this railroad line. And then, so, it just kills me that I never asked him or thought about it. Well, actually, it was before he died, long before we went to Turkey, but I never thought to ask him much about any of that. I do know that he certainly, even that he did stay in touch, and I think I told you that Banana said that the Turkish ambassador came to dinner one time at our house in Greenwich and sat down in one of Mother's really beautiful Queen Anne dining chairs just collapsed under him, which was a little embarrassing to have that happen to the ambassador. Anyway, I just didn't ask. It must have been the most incredible time, because it had to be within, that he started working in Turkey within a very few years, 2 or 3 years of
The revolution.
Ataturk's forming of the country of Turkey. And it just must have been an incredibly interesting time. And at one point, Mother went with him to Turkey. They had a house in France, in Cannes, and left my brother and sister there. And it was when Mother was pregnant with me that she went to Turkey with him. And I don't know if I told you, but I don't know how it got into this house. But I did come across a Turkish grammar with her writing in it, with her writing all the vocabulary in the back and everything. I never knew anything about her studying Turkish. I mean, she studied everything all the time. She was incredible. But anyway, they had this very interesting, very lucrative. I mean, he had a very good business. And as I said, we lived they had moved to Greenwich and then to Belhaven, which is the most exclusive, expensive, fanciest part. Nowadays it would be called a gated community, but we did have chains, and there were 2 policemen, private policemen, who drove around the roads all the time, Tom and Bill. And this in this very, very affluent town. So they'd had a very elegant life, and then the whole thing totally collapsed.
Just to flash back for a second, there was something about when your mother was pregnant with you in Turkey, and Ataturk had said something to your father?
Oh yeah, that he would be my honorary godfather. and she was evidently quite noticeably pregnant, but she hightailed it back to France, because obviously to have a baby in Turkey would not have been.
So this would be 1927?
19, well,
because you were born in
27 or 20 early,
Right.
And then once in France, decided to hightail it back to New York. And I was born in, we covered some of this. I was born in Miss Lippincott Sanatorium, which doesn't exist anymore. Very fancy private place for wealthy women to go and have babies. And the Bishop of Scotland, who was a friend of my father's, how did that happen? I have no idea. Was leaving the country, and so Daddy wanted him to baptize me. So when I was 4 days old, in a terrible snowstorm, I was taken out of Miss Lippincott, and Aunt Leah was my godmother, just in fear and trembling, because she really hadn't ever had a baby of her own, and in this terrible weather, and I was baptized in someplace, I think in the Church of St. Vincent Ferrer or something like that. Anyway, mother and Daddy had very different tastes. He loved vaudeville, and he knew every popular song.
Oh, that's right.
Sidman Romberg and all those things.
Right.
And he played the piano wonderfully.
Right.
And we would all stand around and sing Victor Herbert songs and all those things. They were just totally delightful. For Mother, that was a little lowbrow.
Right.
Though it wasn't lowbrow. It wasn't like being a Rolling Stone or a Beatle fan. It was the elegant, sort of not highly intellectual musical comedies.
More folk. It was more folk type music.
No. Victor Herbert wasn't folk, and Sigmund Romberg wasn't folk. No, those were beautiful songs and things, but not string quartets or symphonies and things like that. But he knew he had, in his bachelor days, I guess, he'd gone to every possible show he possibly could have. He loved them, and he knew of or had seen all the various famous actors and singers and things like that. He also loved good theater, too. But Mother always liked things that were much more severely intellectual. Anyway, she was, when you were asking me why I thought they were so mismatched.
Right.
Because when the crash came and Daddy's business every business all across the globe just collapsed, his associate or person who worked for him took all his funds and disappeared and was never heard from again. And at that time, Daddy's health completely went off, and he had, I thought it was just one, but Ann said 2 operations.